All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Howard. I am the construction trade teacher at Dade County High School, and today we're going to be talking about our table saw. Now, everybody that is in my class should have a copy of our table saw packet, and you can follow along with me with this packet. I'm going to actually bend the screen a little bit so we can actually see our table saw. And our table saw is the same one that is on this packet. Now, as you follow along, I want to point out just a couple things. The handout that I have provided in the packet, it is kind of like a mirror image. So a couple of the items on the packet are a little bit different than what they are on the actual table saw behind me, okay? Some of those would be like the hand wheel for the tilting the blade, and the motor case, which you see on this handout, is showing it is on the right, but as you can see, the black device here, that is the motor cover, and it is on the left on ours. All right, so at this time, I'm gonna go ahead and begin. Again, we are talking about our table saw in the high school construction shop here at Dade County High School, and if you can, follow along with me in the handout. Okay, so the table saw is one of the most useful tools in the shop, okay? It's very useful. We can use it for a lot of different things, and we actually put hands-on, let our kids use them when we are back in the class and actually using them. Now, it's also one of the most dangerous. The reason why it's the most dangerous is because it is a table, and at your house, not very many tables you have at your house actually have a blade protruding through the table. As you can see, there is a blade actually sticking up. It's the table, hence the word table saw, okay? So it is one of the most dangerous, and we're gonna try to respect it and not get anybody hurt. Now, the number one cause of injury on the table saw is kickback. Kickback is when the actual board that's being cut kicks back and comes at you as one of the operators, okay? So you gotta be very careful. You do not want to have a saw kick back on you. And the word kickback actually means when a operator loses control of the board they're cutting and it kicks back on them. Let's make sure we're still recording, okay? So kickback is the number one cause of injuries, and kickback is when the operator loses control of the board that they are actually using. Our particular shop has a 10-inch table saw, which means it has a 10-inch blade. Now, that does not mean it actually comes out of the table 10 inches. One half of that blade is able to actually come to the table. You got to remember you have to have an arbor, which is actually the shaft that holds it onto the motor. So that takes away. So we're only using about 4 inches of our 10-inch blade. Okay. And our table saw here at the shop is powered by 110, which is just a regular outlet like you have at your house. So it is just a common plug. All right. Now, in our packet that everybody should have, there's a components list. What I'm going to do at this time, I'm actually going to go through and point out on the actual table saw the different components. Now, the number one component I want you guys to be familiar with is the push, pull, on, off button. Okay. Now, I actually have ours unplugged because we're doing inspection stuff. You want to make sure you have it unplugged. But a push-pull device like we have right here is a safety feature. This is actually made so you pull it on, and it actually applies power and actually starts the motor and actually starts spinning. It is designed the way it is, so in case something happens, if you accidentally cut your hand off, you cannot reach down and push it. You can bump into this with any part of your body and turn it off, all right? So you pull it on, and it is push off. So that means you can bump into it with any part of your body and turn it off. That is a safety feature, okay? Now, the on-off switch, where it is located is so it is in close proximity to what you're actually cutting. The bad part is there are times when you're actually pushing the board through, you might bump into it. That happens. We're going to try to not let it happen, but it does happen from time to time. So just make sure you pay attention. Don't bump into it. All right, the very next one I want to talk about is the actual table. This is called a table saw because it is actually a table, has the blade in it. We already talked about that, but this is the table right here. You will notice that. Now, our particular setup that we have here actually has what's called an extension wing. This here is the extension wing. That just makes the table bigger. When you're sliding material across it, if it has an extension wing, it actually lets the wood sit on it and you don't have to hold it up while it's going on there, okay? Now, most students in my class have already used the chop saw. They know all about the chop saw, how important the fence is. We have another fence here, all right? This one is actually called a rip fence. We use it while we're ripping boards across the table saw. Make sure that you keep your board firmly against the rip fence while you're pushing it through. Okay, and our rip fence actually has a locking lever on the front, and this is where you actually set the rip fence the correct distance from the blade. All right. On the front of our table saw, it's called the front rail. The front rail actually has a tape measure on the top of it, and that tape measure has a line mark on the locking device. You set it at that distance, that is actually where you'll make your cut with the table saw, okay? Now, on our table saw, we actually have what's called a miter gauge. The miter gauge is like this. You actually can adjust it to different angles, and I'll come up a little bit closer so you guys can see the numerical numbers. There they are, the angles, and this is the miter gauge. All right, if you're looking at your handout, it also says on here the miter gauge slots. That is where this will actually slide into on your table saw. You put it on here, you set the right angle, and then when you cut it, you're cutting that board at that angle. Okay, so that is the miter gauge and the miter gauge slots. Okay, now the back, it says a rear rail, which if you're looking at it, the back, here's the front, here's the rear. The rear rail is just what holds it all together. And if we had a different type of rip fence, it would actually lock to that rear rail. All right. We have a blade guard. At the high school, anytime you're cutting, we always want to make sure the blade guard is down. The way it actually works, when you slide the wood through it, the blade guard raises up for the board to slide through it. As soon as the board goes through, the blade guard goes right back down and covers up the saw. So just remember, you push through here, you're actually pushing and holding the blade guard up so you don't get your fingers cut. Okay? And then we have all right, it shows the anti-kickback fingers. The bad part about our saw, it does not have the anti-kickback fingers. All they're designed to do, if a board is going through, the kickback fingers will lock it in place where it doesn't slide through. Our particular saw does not have it. All right, then we have the blade height adjustment hand wheel. The neat part about that, that is how you control the height of the blade. If you turn the blade height adjustment hand wheel, it actually raises the blade up and down to adjust the height of the blade coming out of the top of the table. And then we have the blade tilting hand wheel, which again on your handout shows it on the left, but is actually on the right. When you turn this, it actually controls the angle and the tilt of the blade. Okay, so that is the different components. And then when you're doing the angle, we have an angle scale below this hand wheel. It actually has a red line on it, and it shows you what angle you have the blade sit at. So all the different all the different components that are listed on our handout, I just went through them, showed you actually on the table saw. Now we're going to go through and talk about one more component. Let me add this in here, the dust collection system. My students know whenever we're in the shop creating dust, over behind the panel saw, we have the dust collector on-off switch, green button, turn it on. Right here at the table saw, we actually have the dust collection system, has a gate valve, make sure it's on, it will actually suck the dust out of the table saw. All right, now I want to tell you a few of the safety rules, and they are actually on the handout. Trying to get it to where it comes on the screen. It says safety, okay? Now, our table saw is very dangerous because it actually has a blade sticking through a table. We've said that. Our table saw requires 2 operators, okay? You cannot operate this saw by yourself. There will always be at least 2 students operating this saw. The first operator will stand on this side of the table, and you are called the feeder. you feed the material into the table saw. All right. The second operator will be on this side of the table saw, and they are the receiver. They receive the wood as it's being cut. So the first person feeds the wood into the saw, the second person receives it, and when you actually get the wood on this side, you do not touch the blade, you pull it through, so you're receiving it. So again, our saw at the Dade County High School construction shop requires 2 operators. Okay? The blade on the table saw should be set to a minimum of 1/4 inch above the piece of wood being cut. Anytime you make adjustments to the saw, you make sure it is unplugged. Ours is unplugged. Take your board that you're going to cut, stick it beside the blade, and then you turn the wheel to where it is actually set at 1/4 inch above the wood. Ours right now is set at 1/4 inch above. Okay? Never adjust the height or the angle while you're cutting. That's for safety reasons. We don't want to do that. You're cutting something, you don't reach down and turn the wheel. If you're cutting something and you're at the wrong height, go ahead and cut it, and then turn the saw off, unplug it, adjust the height, and you can recut it again. Do not turn either hand wheel while you're cutting. All right? Before we actually start cutting, make sure you turn on the dust collection system. We don't want all that sawdust mingling around and getting down in our saw. Turn the dust collection on. Okay? Always keep both hands on the material being cut. Never let go of the material. That's very important. We talked about kickback. Kickback is when you lose control. You actually let go, you're losing control of how that board is cut. Anytime you're cutting, keep your hands on it. Do not get close to the saw blade. Okay? When using a rip fence, make sure that you keep the material firmly against the fence. Do not allow a gap. Keep it tight against the fence. Okay? When removing or replacing the blade, make sure the power cord is disconnected from the outlet. Unplug it. All right? Very simple. Don't mess with the saw while it's plugged in. Never put your hand close to the blade while the table saw is powered on. We don't do that. We don't want to get our fingers up there. Whatever digits you came in with, I want you to go home with them. The way we do that is we don't put our hands next to the blade. All right, while you are putting your material into the saw to be cut, after it gets so close, then I want you to use a push stick. We actually have 2 plastic push sticks. They actually have the notch in them that is designed to go up against the board and push it. If you don't have one of our plastic ones, you can just use a piece of wood. This is just a little piece of cedar that's been cut. Cedar smells great, but anyway, you can use this as a push stick. Always use a push stick. Never try to put your hand close to the blade. Okay? Do not reach over the saw blade and never pass items over the saw. The reason why, if you happen to reach over, you might forget and accidentally make contact with the blade. Even if the blade is not on, do not pass stuff over the blade. You try to train yourself to get in the habit of not doing it, we won't do it. Okay, so don't reach over the saw blade, never pass items over the saw blade. Push the on-off push-pull switch to the off position, push it off as soon as you're done. Do not walk away from the saw while it is on. I understand we are limited on time when we're in the shop, but you do not need to leave the saw running, go across the shop and come back and think you're going to saw. It doesn't work that way. Turn it off, let it stop, and then walk away. Okay? And then in bold red at the bottom, it actually says, do not walk away from the saw with the power on. Very simple. We're not going to do it. All right, so that's our safety. Now, the last thing I want to talk about on our table saw is the table saw operation. And again, it's in your handout, table saw operation. Okay? The first thing that we do, and my students already know, every time we introduce a new tool, the first thing we do is inspect it. We're going to go around and make sure there's nothing wrong with it. Make sure there's no nicks, cuts, debris, trash. Make sure there's nothing that can hurt us on the saw, okay? Adjust the blade and the height. Set that height before we get ready to cut. Makes sense, okay? Adjust the rip fence. That means make sure you're set at the right measurement before you actually turn the saw on, okay? You're using a miter gauge, adjust the angle before we power it on. Don't turn it on and then start adjusting the angle. adjust the miter gauge before we turn it on. Make sure the blade guard is in place and make sure it operates correctly. While the saw is on and plugged, make sure that the saw blade guard is in place. Make sure it goes up. You can practice by running the board beside the blade. You see it goes up, and when it goes out of it, the blade guard goes down. Make sure that you practice with that. Okay? Turn on the dust collector before you turn on the table saw. We've talked about that. Make sure the dust collector is turned on. Make sure the gate valve is on the actual hose. Okay? Make sure you have a second person. Now, when you guys come back to school, we actually start doing our our table saw in class, you will be required to have 2 people to operate. Now, here's the problem. I will stand right beside you, but I'm not your operator. You will have to have somebody else. If I ask that second person what their job is, they have to be able to tell me they are the receiver if they're your second person. Make sure the receiver knows what their job is, okay? Make sure there's nothing touching the saw blade. Students, when they're first learning, you get up here, you're a little intimidated, you get everything lined up, everything's perfect, you go ahead and push your board up here. Kids like to push the board all the way to the saw and then turn it on. We don't do that. Keep it back a couple inches, turn it on, and then once the blade reaches full speed, then you actually push the wood into it. Okay? Make sure that you have the push stick, close by, so when you actually start cutting, you don't have to search for it. It's right beside there. Okay? Make sure that you put your board firmly against the rip fence. Do not let it wander off. Make sure it's up against the rib fence. All right? Turn the table saw on, use the push-pull, and pull it out. That's how you turn it on. Okay? Make sure you keep your board tight to the rib fence and begin pushing your board. Now, when we start pushing our board, we're not trying to hurry and push it. We're trying to push at a steady pace. You start going too slow, the wood's going to start burning, the saw blade's going to start binding down. Push at a constant speed. Not super fast, not super slow. Find the right speed to push it through, okay? And then again, just make sure while you're cutting, you actually keep it against the rib fence, keep it at a steady pace, all right? While you're keeping your board against the rib fence, make sure that you grab your push stick with one hand and push with the push stick. As soon as your board is cut, turn the table saw off by pushing in on the push, pull, start, stop button. Okay, turn off the dust collector. After that's finished, make sure the blade stops and then clean up any debris away. Do not leave your cut piece here for somebody else to clean up. Clean it up yourself. All right, that is a very quick run through on our table saw. We talked about the components, we talked about the safety, and then we talked about the actual operation. So at this time, I'm actually going to take the laptop and I'm going to walk up to the table saw and I'm going to let you see a little bit closer. You can see the measurements on the front rail. You can see the hand wheel, the push-pull on-off switch. There is the angle tilt wheel. And again, where are we at here? There we are. There is our table saw in the Dade County High School construction class. All right. So my name is David Howard. Today we talked about the table saw. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. You can send me a message on Remind. Just remember, we're going to get through this. Do your best and have a wonderful day. Thank you.